Evening. Welcome to, in fact, before we start, it might be a bit more, it might be polite to introduce myself. I am Professor Tennyson Mukuchini. I am your facilitator for tonight, and many of you will know me as a project leader for this, the Accelerated Masters and Doctoral online support program that UNISA facilitates. We are today doing a blast session, and I'm hoping that that term is very familiar to you now. Basically, as you know, with blast sessions, we set them up to deal with specific topics that individuals find difficult. And we've had two very distinct requests over the course of time, and we will try to engage with those. The first of those requests was that we've had many of the students asking for guidance on a range of things. They want to have an opportunity to have a face-to-face inquiry with anyone who possibly can kind of speak to them about all the issues that come up, from how you develop a topic for your study, from how you set the objectives, how you determine the primary aim of your study, how you turn those objectives and figure out how what type of methodological choices you have in relation to the objectives that you've set, how you actually operationalize your methodology so you know how to implement it. Also, how you analyze, collect data, how you turn that data into strategies, into recommendations, into a framework, into a model. All those things, and the basics of how, or the guidance and detail on how you develop a chapter, different chapters within your dissertation or within your thesis. So we basically have been asked to avail a facilitator who can speak to all those questions. In the absence of that, of course, we have one or two very distinct standalone topic areas that we have been asked to provide some insight into. And so I have a standby presentation on writing for publication, should we struggle to garner the right questions and answers. So Monday's session yesterday was a question and answer session. We had a huge number of questions. Once again, we had quite exceptional turnout. And you will remember that I spoke yesterday a little bit about the fact that we have had situations where some of our attendees have preferred to listen to the post-recorded copies of these sessions without actually attending the live sessions. Of course, that is an option that you have, but it means you don't have a chance to pose questions in the moment. You also kind of have to relate to a presentation that you cannot control in any shape or form, because by the time you watch it, all that could happen would have happened, and it really can't be affected by the contributions that you make. So I'm hoping, and we are encouraging everybody to make room for attending the live sessions. We do appreciate that you have preferences as to who the facilitators are and all that sort of stuff. And we have paid attention, and so you will see much more appearance of me in particular, because it seems that the students have sort of felt that they need a facilitator who's heavily involved with the rules and regulations that affect their lives. So, as you know, I am the Dean for the College of Graduate Studies. So all the procedures and processes that relate to your journey, all the issues around overseeing that your colleges treat you well, they all end up in some shape or form in my office. So it's good that I get a first-hand insight into the things you're challenged with, but also it's good for you to have access to someone who could hear your challenges and also be able to create policies, give instructions for things to be corrected. So that is basically the dynamic and the space in which we are working tonight. What I want to start the session with is to invite questions. So we're going to invite, I ask you if you have any problem that relates to your research journey. This is the space where you present it. You've got the question and answer tab where you can post things. Of course, if we get to about 6:45, 7 p.m. local time, South African time, and I have not received the right number of questions, then I will do a very quick crash course on writing for publication. But in the first instance, we're going to entertain questions, and any questions, and even questions to do with if there are people who specifically attended this session, hoping to engage in or hear about writing for publication. Please pose the type of questions that you have so we can deal with them in the Q&A section, just in case it turns out that we don't have the full writing for publication session that we want. Now, we also have, remember the coming week, the week of the 12th, the week of the 4th, the week when we have the 12th, the 14th, and the 16th. We have sessions, sections or sessions that are looking at grant writing. So if by any chance today we don't adequately cover writing for publication, we will cover it when it comes to the following week, because I can literally do writing for publication and grant writing in follow-on sessions. That's kind of what we are likely to do depending on the questions that we have been posed. Now, for the purposes of making sure that this session runs well and we don't kind of stifle your bandwidth, I will turn off the camera. I will turn off the camera so we can see, we can allow you to focus much more on the audio component rather than the video component. So without further delay, I will do that now. Okay, let's look at the questions that, okay, right. Okay, it says, right, okay, so it seems like the questions that we have are for writing for publication, which might mean we will probably end up doing a bit of a thorough session on this, which is perfectly okay. Remember, the reason that you've selected me or you've chosen this format is to just have the freedom of a very responsive session where you can pose a question and that question will be attended to immediately. So and remember, you will probably be thinking to yourself, wow, how do we ask questions before we know what is being presented? So I will look at the questions that you posed, and if they all relate to writing for publication and it's something I can cover formally, then I will say, look, this session will cover that, and now I will proceed on and do. Okay, so people are saying, what results, which aspect of your study results are important for publication? So that's a very important question, by the way. It's much more important than one would imagine. And this being the fact that all of you are going to be trying to condense, some of you 100 pages if it's a master's or thereabouts, some 300, 400 pages if it's a doctorate. And you may be trying to condense the discoveries from a piece of that size into a 10-page, 12-page article. So it's really important that we know what you take in and what you leave. the basic guidance is this. That guidance is, firstly, you must understand that when you write for publication, you are offering an opportunity for readers to listen, to read something that is groundbreaking, something that is responding to a question that others in your discipline have explored and maybe not sufficiently answered. So that is what the principle you must think about with journal articles, that it's not about, when you write anything for publication, it's not about reporting the everyday thing. It's not about reporting the everyday thing. It's about reporting standout observations, standout discoveries. So already that tells you that when you are sharing the results that you want to share, one of the principles that you want to align with is this idea that you want to share those results that you think are stand out. They stand out because they're unexpected. So if you are looking at a topic and you had an expectation of what you would find, and there are findings that you thought were outside of that, and they presented new interesting possibilities for understanding the topic, then those are the findings you would share. Similarly, remember, when you write a paper, you will have very specified questions that you are hoping the paper will answer. So you may be interested in issues to do with students failing or anything of that nature. And maybe one of the questions was, what is the extent of failure and success? So your results then will have to show insights into how common or how frequently reported failure or success are. And maybe if one of your next questions is you want to know the characteristics of those people who fail, then of course your reports will, the reporting of your findings will focus on that. Then sometimes there are things you have not asked that emerge, but you think that they represent very significant new discoveries. So say, for example, with the same issue of studying and figuring out who passes and who doesn't pass, you are actually you carry out the study and you discover that actually maybe housewives, you discover that housewives or females who are married appear to score better than people who are not married and who are male. But you had not set out to discover that, but you've discovered it and you see it as a standout finding. Then of course you would go, oh, this is a finding that I want to share. Sometimes in a similar study to that, you may have a compound of things that you didn't expect to find, but they actually strike you as being unusual. So say if you collected data about people who succeed or fail or do well, and you discover that all the people who seem to succeed are actually employees of the university, that none of the people who fail are employed by the university. It's only those who work at the university who seem to have 100% success rate. Then you'll say, I never asked this question, but I discovered this. So in terms of what you choose or how you choose what you choose, and report the results that speak to the questions you asked, report the findings that stand out by virtue of them differing from what you expected. And then of course, sometimes you may have findings that actually contradict existing understanding of the topic. You want to share those because you want people to see what new contribution you're making. Right. The next one is good evening, Professor. My topic is how COVID-19 lockdown has affected teaching physical science. They're doing a master's in education proposal. I'm struggling with conceptual framework and approach since the problem is relatively novel. Okay, So, you know, there's something that is called inferential literature. And this term inferential literature refers to literature that's not related to what you're studying, but is close enough for you to draw inferences from it. So take, if I was going to study the behaviors of people who go in and out of prison, for example, okay? And I believed that going in and out of prison was very similar to people who are forced in and out of psychiatric hospitals. But I have no data on going in and out of prison, although I have data on going in and out of psychiatric hospitals. Then you can take some of the patterns that relate to this similar phenomena and use it to guide your understanding or your expected discoveries in relation with the new topic. So when you say how has COVID-19 lockdown affected teaching physical science, you may not have specific COVID-19 related things, but you may actually have literature that looks at things and occurrences that have happened in the past, which limited social movement. And you want to know how those phenomena affected teaching physical science or teaching practice story. So people can refer to wartime restrictions, where people were forbidden from being in certain places, where the health of the population was worse than average. You can take, there will be literature on how those difficult times impacted people's ability to teach. What, of course, I look at the topic, and one of the things that I think about is for you to arrive at a topic such as lockdown, COVID-19 and its impact on teaching physical science, one would think that you have fairly good set of data that's showing you that actually this problem was unique to physical education science, to physical science education. Because if it is not about if you have no evidence of that, for you to just suddenly decide that you focus on lockdown and physical science might be frowned upon, because people look at it and say, but why did you choose that particular subject when you have no evidence that the subject is any different from all the other subjects? So personally, I have questions about that topic as it is presented. I am not entirely clear that I would support it as it is in any case. But what you always, I say with issues is you must always be clear about what the noted and evidenced problem that you are looking at is. So we need to know what is the evidenced and literature supported problem that prompted you to look at this topic. And if you just chose it because it felt like a nice topic, it felt like it made sense, then we have a problem. You need to have chosen it because it's aligned with an existing and significant problem. What not to include for publication of my dissertation? That's the question. What not to include for publication of my dissertation? Folks, I want to dispel a number of myths. One of the myths that exist, and is frequently disproven, and I disagree with them with the huge percentage of supervisors, and I disagree, and I do so because I have seen, experienced, and I am a product of what I'm talking about. So there is this myth that when people have a dissertation or a thesis, they've finished their master's, they've finished their doctorate, that document that they finished can just be published. This is an entire myth. And the reason it's an entire myth is because when you write journal articles, the purpose of what you want to communicate, the angle, the emphasis that is promoted are totally different from a dissertation or a thesis. All that your dissertation and thesis offer you is ready at hand findings and data which you can then use. But beyond that, they don't give you a shortcut to writing for publication. So in essence, even if you have a dissertation or a thesis, you should tell yourself, I don't have it. I just have the results and the questions that I asked. But everything else you must recreate and custom make for a journal, because your dissertation won't be the right source for what you need. So things like, in your dissertation and in your thesis, you write with the intention of educating the reader about your phenomena. So you do definitions. You will see that in your dissertation, you define everything from the methodology. You define many things in it. When you write for publication, the definitions are minimal. You only define the concept that you're talking about. If it's an obscure concept that needs definition. But everything else that you do does not require or is not interested in you defining concepts. Writing for publication is you sharing and breaking news about discoveries that speak to a problem that others are going through, and you're hoping that if they see how you've handled it, they themselves can also benefit from being better informed. So essentially, when you're writing for publication, take your dissertation, take your thesis, put them next to you, start the process from scratch. But knowing that you know which research questions you had, you know what findings you had in relation to those related research questions. Secondly, normally a dissertation or a thesis has got 5 or 6 objectives, and not all of them are publication worthy. So you might have 1 or 2 objectives that you think these objectives are relating to things I'm interested in, or these questions are relating to questions that I really think need to be answered. And so your papers that you write will maybe be focused on one objective or one research question and not on all the others. So, but essentially, the dissertation should not be replacing your need to do a paper afresh. Why you do the paper afresh is that, remember, some of you may not have explored this, and I will do a full session next week. I'm looking at the questions and they are piling up, so I think we will be doing just questions tonight, but next week we'll do a formal session. So when you are writing a paper, one of the things that you really need to do, and you must do right from the very start, is to decide where you want that paper to go. Before you've even written the paper, say, I'm interested in topic X. Where are the best publications that relate to this topic found? What are the journals that are interested in topics such as the one I want to write about? What are the, and if you know those journals, then you pursue them. You go into the Department of Higher Education and Training list of accredited journals. You make sure the journal that you're interested is in there. You choose 3 or 4 such journals that you think, they basically look at my area. I'm happy that they're accredited. I'm happy that they are published enough times a year for me to get a chance. Because some journals are published once every 18 months, but you want something that's 4 times a year or continuous online, so you really have options. But so that's the first thing you do. You identify a home or a venue for your study, for your paper, because unless you have a home or a venue, you know nothing about the expectations of where this paper is going. So if you identify a potential venue, a potential paper home for your study, you're able then to basically custom make your paper to the target that you want. And how you custom make it is you go to the journal's website and then you look at the author guidelines and you tell yourself, okay, these are how the things, the sections they want me to have, and so forth and so forth. Then you decide that if that is indeed the case, let me find some old papers that they've done so that I can look at the structure, look at how they've prioritized certain things and so forth. And those old papers from that journal will be on the very website of the journal. So you can download 3 or 4 old papers and then study those papers, study the way they write the introduction, study the emphasis they put on how they communicate results, study everything. And so when you develop your paper, it is in line with those things. So clearly, the fact that your dissertation was written without you ever knowing your target journal, there's a high likelihood that your dissertation in itself will never be publishable as it stands. Of course, individuals such as yourself or others have seen dissertations that appear to be published fully as a dissertation, but we call that vanity publications, and they generally count for nothing in academia. So you can, if you have enough money, pay a company that will, Amazon, Take a Lot, those types of companies will publish your book, your dissertation for you. What they do is they'll say, look, bring us the dissertation. They will put on some cover art, play around with it, print one copy and send it to you. And then they will just put them online and say to anyone who's interested in this, they can order it and then they print as per order. So that is a very different type of publication from what I am talking about, because vanity publication has the only requirement that you have to meet is you should be willing to pay the money that they want. They don't care about the quality, they don't care about anything, they just want your money so they can publish things. So yeah, so this is the guideline, very long-winded answer to the question about what you can include, but I've done it that way purposefully to offer an opportunity to answer some things that would have otherwise not been raised. Then the next question is, Prof, can you please mention Fixen et al. In detail? Right, I would need to know who Fixen et al. Are for me to mention them. So folks, here's the story. Hey? So research is any single topic. I studied a very specific topic for my doctorate, and I had to also reference a lot of research sources. And I recall I had over 180 research sources only. And then, of course, in addition to that, I had sources that were specific to the subject I was looking at and to the content. So basically, the point I'm making is that it is quite possible for someone who knows a fair amount about research to have never heard about Vixen, because there are many publications. So if anyone who's mentioned this Vixen thing, if Tigist Semel Kukem wants to share what Vixen is all about, I may actually know what they're talking about, but just not remember names. Okay, so the next question is from Lebo Khan, who says, good evening, Prof. My topic is South African farmers' attitude towards dehoning. I'm struggling with objectives. So, firstly, everyone tells me the focus of their topic, which is great, but I actually need to know what the problem is. Because unless I know what problem you are interested in, then I can't devise knowledge acquisition objectives, because all your objectives that you do in a study are about acquiring knowledge. So if you have not told me the problem, then I cannot, if I know the topic, I cannot just develop objectives without knowing the problem. But I'm going to try and assist Level Hang here by pretending I tend to know a fair lot about all these research issues and stuff, but I'm assuming if I'm assuming that there's a particular problem with dehorning, so maybe as a way of protecting animals from being poached and killed and done whatever to, there is probably a livestock position that says, look, if you want your animals to be safe from these types of threats, dehorn them. So, and of course, even though the guidance says that that should happen, farmers continue to not dehorn their animals because once you dehorn it, it's perceived as incomplete and so forth and so forth. So you are actually, the problem that you're saying is that, look, our animals are unsafe there and we've got a process to make them safe, but the farmers who are meant to uptake this are not uptaking it. So then your objectives begin, they start to be about, let me first determine what the nature of this problem is. So probably your first objective is about determining the nature and extent of the problem that you're studying. So you want to know in what ways people fail to dehorn, what are the percentage of farmers who refuse to take part in dehorning. That would be kind of your first objective. And every first objective that you come across is driven by just establishing the basic knowledge for that topic. So every first objective always looks like that. It's always about establishing the most basic understanding about that topic. Then all the other objectives after that start to now query things that are related to your interest. So maybe your thing is to understand what the perceptions of farmers are in relation to the benefits or the costs of dehorning. So that could be your next objective. Then maybe one of the objectives is you're thinking, okay, they've now told me what the problem is. I need to also get the farmers to tell us what interventions and actions they think can be introduced by those in power to improve uptake of dehorning. So already those are the kind of the objectives that I'm suggesting for you. But remember, I can't know what objectives you need unless I know what level of study you're at. So already that question that you asked Level Hang tells me that you haven't thought about or you don't perceive the level of your study being important in guiding how you develop your objectives. But guess what? It is critical. So people at master's level can show a broad understanding of a topic by having objectives that show that broad understanding. But people at doctoral level, you're meant to have an objective that shows that you are going to develop new knowledge. So you will find that the objectives that people at doctoral level have tend to have the last objective as them developing a framework, developing a model, and so forth. But master's level, you don't concern yourself with that. So essentially what I'm saying is that doctoral level objectives will be more. They tend to be between 5 and 8. It's not a fixed number, but I'm sharing with you the pattern that I've observed over 21 years of doing this. But also the master's and doctoral, the master's level ones tend to be about 3 to 5 objectives. Then those of you who do a mini dissertation, which is a mini version of a master's, may actually find that you've got 2 to 3 objectives. So that question that Level Hang has asked has got variations, but what you need to know is that your first objective is to establish and understand the problem. Then your other objectives that follow after that are to do with elements of the problem that you were interested in asking or understanding, and that's how you develop them. If it's a doctoral objective that you're setting, Your final objective will be about creation of new knowledge through providing recommendations, strategies, and so forth. What happens when the supervisor is not reaching out to the student? So folks, don't ever forget this. This study journey is yours. It's not the supervisor's, it is yours. If you don't succeed, it is you who goes without a qualification. It's not the supervisor. For all intents and purposes, many such supervisors who have forgotten to call you or do whatever, they care so little that they don't have sleepless nights over this. So you must own the need to correct your status. So if you have a supervisor who's not finding you, you have to own that the prerogative, the duty to correct this lies squarely on your shoulders, because you are the only person who really understands how important this thing is. And with that as your departure point, you then say, okay, if I was a person at a shopping or at a place that's meant to provide customer service, and I really thought I was a rightful customer, I was a worthy client, I should be respected. If the primary person who's not there to serve me does not serve me, I tell them about it. I write and I say, hey, I'm concerned, so and so. I'm requesting that you offer me an answer within X amount of days. If X amount of days does not come, you go to your tutorial guide and you check who the chair of department for that place is, or who the MND, there's a master's and doctoral coordinator in every department, and you email them to say, hi, I'm student X and Y. I am not heard from my supervisor from such and such a time. I'm concerned that something may have happened. I'm asking for your urgent intervention because I need to complete so that I don't have to pay fees again. Whatever it is that you put in. But that's what you do. You share that with your M&D coordinator or your chair of department. And often if you rise enough, you discover that you rise enough in the people you're seeking, you will get a response. And ultimately, at the very end of all this, you have the right as a student to request service from another person, another supervisor. But what often needs to happen is you must explore every potential option before you go down that route. There's a question that says, Prof, I'm not sure if I should ask this here or if I must direct it to our department administrator. Look, it's good you've asked it here. I'm yet to read it. But one thing I know is you never know if it was right to ask or not unless you pose it. So that's a theory, that's a principle I hold. I'm currently registered at UNISA for a PhD. I have one supervisor who's an external supervisor. I'm currently writing 5 papers out of my PhD. When we submit the papers for publication, which affiliation must we use? Okay, right. So we have an interesting question here, but the principles of sorting it out are the same. So we have a student who is writing papers, and that student is going to write papers with an external examiner who is not at UNISA. Remember, you met this external supervisor as an employee of UNISA. So when they assist you in that capacity, they subscribe to UNISA rules. They are UNISA employee for the purposes of supervising you. So at the very least, when that that external supervisor writes the paper, he or she must declare their affiliation as being UNISA, first and foremost. Secondly, you as a student, on the other hand, you are writing at UNISA, but actually, if you work elsewhere and you are now, if during the time that you're writing this, you are a student of UNISA, then the affiliation you write is the UNISA affiliation. But some people will, after 2 years, still publish papers. And then if you publish those papers and you're no longer a student, and those papers, you are in another place that's interested in publications, then you keep that for that place. So without depriving UNISA of your output, remember when you finish your PhD, there's only a requirement for you to have two publications. So the other 3 papers you've got, you can literally hold back until you graduate and you are not a UNISA student, and then you can publish them with an affiliation other than UNISA. But while you are a student, UNISA it is. And even your external examiner, if they are working for you under the employment of UNISA as an external supervisor, then that's where they exist. Good evening. Please, can you advise what the length of a proposal for a doctoral studies? And you need 2 cases studies. I have done my proposal, but always seems to be long. So I understand one part of the question. I don't understand the other part. So look, the length of a proposal for a doctorate is determined normally by departments. The university has a standard. We have a standard form that we ask everybody to complete, and in the form itself, it gives guidance about the length of things. Okay, and I'm trying to see whether I can share something now. We'll see whether I've got. But in essence, the UNISA proposal document that all the universities, all the colleges are meant to use is a template, and that template allows for people to complete sections according to their need. And that template also indicates under each section how long something should be. So it will say in the background, make sure it's 650 words for a master's, 1,000 words for a doctorate. So if you use the right research proposal documentation, then you will notice that actually it describes and tells you. But round about 15-20 pages is what that document asks for. But some departments who know that they are very elaborate fields may demand up to 30 pages or so. But you ask and clarify that question from your department. There isn't a single one space that dictates everything. Something from Amber, it says, I'm enrolled for a coursework master's in intellectual property law. I understand that master's students are required to publish a certain number of articles during the degree. Which is the best way to begin this process? So, Amber, and I speak about this being the person who wrote this policy. Hey, so I wrote it some 2-3 years ago. It's of course been changed, and it's being communicated in a way that is different from what the intention was. So, firstly, the intention was that the publication requirement was set up for people who are doing research-based master's courses. So if you're doing a coursework master's course, then you are getting your points from the modules in the coursework. So there is no requirement according to that policy for you to actually publish. That is the university standpoint, but you may have a supervisor who says something different, and what then I say to you is that you say to the supervisor, hello, I have had a look at the master's and doctoral procedures, and they indicate that publications are for those doing research-based masters. Can I ask whether the publication that you're asking me to do is a voluntary one, or whether that publication is part of the university requirement? Then, of course, you'll get an answer that says it's voluntary. And then when it's time to write, because you can't, when you write a publication, you don't just write because you've been told to write. So one would expect that as part of your coursework masters, you have a module on research. And it is that problem in the module on research that you focus on. And that's where you develop your writing interest. But you need to find a problem that exists in your field, a problem that you feel that people have not adequately answered or responded to in the academic literature that you read to. Then you try to understand that problem through reading 20 to 50 papers relating to the problem, so you understand the nature of what the current knowledge is, what it is that people are arguing about, what it is that they don't understand. And on that basis, you now have a sense of a topic. And then I will now, to next week, I will walk through the actual formation of a paper. But that is the background you need. However, Amber, I do believe that you need to really clarify whether this requirement sits with the coursework masters that you are on, because it wasn't written with that in mind. Hey? I'm truly struggling to put up good literature review chapters from my master's dissertations. My supervisors required 3 chapters on literature reviews. Okay. Firstly, you are doing a master's dissertation, so that whole requirement that you should have 3 chapters on literature reviews stumps me. It is not. There's someone who says, I'm truly struggling to put up good literature review chapters for my master's dissertations. My supervisors require 3 chapters on literature review, and my study focuses on the relationship between only 2 constructs, engagement and commitment in the workplace. I did not struggle this much in my proposal stage, but now in chapter development, I find myself almost always stuck or having a mental block. Any advice about how you go to this? So I'm going to ask my team, because you are asking this question because I assume you have not attended the sessions that I've done on how to write a literature review. So you need that section because it tells you the different types of literature reviews. It tells you also that a literature review serves 4 purposes predominantly. One is to establish the current existing knowledge about the issue or question you're interested in. 2 is to highlight the number of agreed upon positions in relation to your topic, be it engagement and commitment in the workplace. 2, 3, it will show those things that are contested or disagreed about in relation to your topic or the question you're interested in. Then 4, it will also allow you to share insights into the areas that current research seems to have overlooked or not given priority to or missed out, the knowledge gaps. So that's what a literature review should do. This idea that it should have 3 chapters, I'm afraid to tell you, there is no, I've never come across such. And I know when you get that, it's because there's a disjuncture in the type of supervisory expectation. So what you need to do is to listen to the literature review chapter that, or the sessions that we offer, and I'll ask our colleagues once again to share the link to all our lectures, so you can, the document, the link, in fact, every invitation that we send out for one of these sessions, we've attached a list of sessions that we've had. And if you click on that list of sessions, you will get all the sessions that I'm talking about. So you really ultimately need to go and listen to the developing a literature review session. It's 2 hours or so, but it really covers many, many things, and it will give you a basis for how you write a literature review. But this thing about 3 chapters, Firstly, a literature review is one chapter. So I don't know how you can have one chapter be 3 chapters. They might ask for 3 sections, and maybe the first section is they want you to give an overview of the problem, the statistics around it, and so forth. Then the next section might be that they want you to offer the theories that are offered in relation to this topic. Then maybe the third section is they want you to debate what the existing research says about the topic. But those are 3 sections and not 3 chapters. So I think you really need to just go back to that. But I'm also concerned that you have not listened to the lecture, and you can't, there's no shortcut around that except listening to the lecture. Another question from me, I'm struggling to refine my research topic. My topic is far too broad. So here's the thing. You only have broad topics if you have not read enough about the subject. So that's the first question and the first directive or observation that I've made working with students is that before you can actually know what issue you are looking at, you can have a hunch of a problem and say, I have a hunch that there's something not right that's going on here. In my area of practice, I notice that people seem to struggle with answering this issue. They seem to struggle with this. They seem to struggle with that. And so that is the first point of entry into a research problem. People generally access it in this way. But once you have done that, you then think, okay, I wonder if this problem that I'm observing is unique to me, but other people don't experience it how I experience it. I want to know that. And the way you do that is then go to the literature. Search all the literature that relates to your topic that you can find, and you read the most relevant paper, and you think, it seems like my topic is not answered. All the papers will tell you what they were targeting. They will tell you what the issue that they still feel is contested and has not been adequately answered, and so forth. They will tell you all these things. And once you read paper 1, it will say, this is the issue that has not been attended to satisfaction. So that is the way you begin to refine a topic. That the more you read, the more the articles tell you the areas that have not yet been answered. And as you proceed, you will discover that all the journal articles that are recent will be pointing to 1 or 2 things that they were unable to answer in their study. They'll be pointing to a lot of these things that are still low-hanging and unanswered fruit. And that's how you narrow down your topic, through reading and understanding exactly what the issues that currently seem contested are, and you choose one of those. Thank you. Our moderator has given a link, as you know, to where you can access all our PowerPoint presentations on this link. I may ask them also to share the YouTube address of our private YouTube account so that you can just go and watch videos as they are titled. So I will ask that the facilitators share the YouTube address for this. Excuse me. What is the structure of the PhD thesis? Folks, once again, you need to go now. This is something I can't answer in 2 seconds because they are different structures. But in essence, structure PhD chapter 1 is the introduction and background and overview. This sets the scene. Chapter 2 is normally the literature review, and this is where you debate the current pre-existing literature, current literature, and all the debates that exist. Chapter 3 is usually where you look at theoretical frameworks and the conceptual framework that you will utilize for your study. Chapter 4 is where you develop data. This is the methodology section where you explain to the reader the different methodological choices that you made. Chapter 5 is usually where you communicate the results of your study. And depending on whether your study has one phase 2 or 3 phases. Some people may decide to present their findings as separate pages, separate chapters. So if they have a qualitative bit, they might present some of their findings in chapter 5, maybe a quantitative bit, make that chapter 6 and so forth. But the common route is that people will just have one chapter 5 that has all the qualitative and quantitative findings in one. Then chapter 6 is usually referred to as a theory development chapter, where you take your findings and you now propose theories and new ways of seeing things, and you do that in the chapter. Then chapter 7 becomes your recommendations, your recommendations and your conclusions that you offer. That's the generic structure. But as I say, I urge you to go and look at we have a YouTube link on chapter development within a master's and doctorate. So that will speak to all these things very clearly. I'm still struggling writing a proposal. Can you please give me detailed information? Look, once again, folks, when you're writing a proposal, it's very detailed. We have got a session, we have got a number of sessions on that link that's given about that talk to you about how to write a proposal. And you have to listen to those sessions. There is no shortcut option that can be attended to in a question and answer format, because we are kind of trying to get a shortcut to a process that can only be understood if you understand it in detail. So that's what I'm directing. For honors qualifications, how is it different from everything else you've already mentioned? That's a wild question, hey? Because think about it. I mean, you are asking me how honors qualifications differ from everything I've spoken about in the last hour. So essentially, I would have to spend an hour to explain it. Look, honors, every single one of your courses that you do have got what they call learning outcomes. So the honors learning outcomes will say to you that you need to develop a study, and the study must be able to offer a descriptive account of something. So you know immediately that, so they want me to do a study where I can describe what I've seen. But at master's level and at higher level, people will do studies with the intention that they might analyze, evaluate, synthesize things. At doctoral level, people will think that they need to develop things where, as one of their outcomes, they create new knowledge. Of course, honors level research is not about that. Honors level research will be, you're interested in studying a topic, so you know what's going on, the extent, the nature of it, how common it is. And maybe you can analyze one concept that relates to it. That's about it. But once again, we've got a session that is on our YouTube channel and also on that link that talks about differentiating between master's and doctoral study expectations. That will give you some sense. Is it acceptable at times that I may be doing a quantitative study, but I wish to apply purposive sampling? Never, ever, ever, ever is it acceptable. The two things are based on very different premises. So the first, quantitative studies or quantitative designs work entirely on mathematical probability. They argue that for anything to be valid, it needs to have been subjected to mathematical probability. Purposive sampling has nothing at all to do with mathematical probability. So it's literally like asking if someone is interested in measuring things in inches, you want to know whether you would be allowed to use a thermometer. It's a totally that conceptually in juxtaposed and non-agreeing spaces. But you may have a study that is both quantitative and qualitative. So the qualitative element can be subjected to purposive sampling, but the quantitative you have to find a randomized option. Random sampling, systematic sampling, stratified sampling, those types of options. Good evening. Is it possible to do publication of an article after 3 years of completing masters? Look, if you publish something that is 3 years old, you remember that the basis, and I've said this from the start, the basis of why you write things is that you are sharing groundbreaking things that have not been kind of contemplated in your field. You are adding new dimensions to the knowledge. So if you are of the view that what you wrote 3 years ago still can do that, then you can. But in all likelihood, what you wrote 3 years ago is not likely to do that. There's also that issue that I mentioned about the fact that really your dissertation and your thesis are not papers that are pre-ready. They only just offer you important objectives and the findings related to the objective. Everything else you rewrite afresh. I was never advised by a template for a proposal. Please, can you share? And I've been going back and forth with edits. Folks, on our documents, if you go there, there's proposals. There's proposal templates for the different colleges, but all of them should be the same. The university has one single proposal template, and is the one that people use for ethical clearance. Ethical clearance. Yeah, I'm trying to see whether I have it here ready to show, but folks, it is there. There's one document, and that document covers everything. It covers everything. So yeah, we have it on our set of documents, but if by some chance you struggle to find it, you can email me and I will share it out, or email our group and I will share it out. But remember, just we've compiled all these papers according to the college under which your study is registered, so you're able to specify. But essentially, all the colleges are mandated to have similar paperwork, but we've differentiated it because some have slightly different instructions. Prof, I'm busy with my master's proposal. I will be conducting my research at selected departments in Limpopo and Gauteng, but I'm not sure which departments to choose. Right, folks, I answered this question yesterday. I've dealt with this question before, and I dealt with it thoroughly yesterday. So it all has to do with whether your study is quantitative, qualitative, who are the people who are likely to give you, what's the identity of the group that have the information you feel is most important. But I did answer this yesterday, so I will urge whoever is asking this to go back and refer to that. Is it necessary to discuss all types of paradigms in a master's proposal? Folks, it's not necessary, but you may have had a specific instruction that says you should, in which case it has become necessary. So remember, much of this, what you do when you are doing proposals, they are basic standards, but then there are also things that are specific to who is asking you. But the answer is it's not necessary. But if your supervisor says it's necessary, I wouldn't argue with them. I would just do it. It is necessary for you to understand all the paradigms to justify how you've chosen the one you've chosen. So essentially what you are writing is not what you don't know. It's something you already should be knowing, but you chose to not write about it. So it's a very small delineating difference as far as I'm concerned, but that's just my opinion. My PhD is in information systems. My topic, a model of predictors for online shopping. My study is quantitative. At which stage do I incorporate methodologies like design science, or can I still do away with it? You don't incorporate methodologies just because it's fashionable to do so. You incorporate them because the questions you're asking are best answered by those methodologies. So if design science does not answer your questions any better than any other methodology would, then don't include it. Remember, ultimately, your design and the focus of what you're doing is to present a method that you are choosing to answer the questions that you have posed. If that is the ultimate start and end of this. So if you're doing things because you think they're fashionable, they beef the study up, and it has nothing to do with answering the question, then you're barking up the wrong tree. Folks, you'll notice that on the chat, you've been given a link to our YouTube videos. And I tell you, there is just no way you can understand many of the things that have been asked here without the foundational knowledge that comes with these videos. So don't think you can ask questions now and again with the literature review and hope that my answers will fulfill it. The only answers that will do this are the sessions. So I'm compelling, I'm directing, I'm requesting, I'm pleading to all of you to go back to that YouTube channel and get things from there. Is the plan do study, act, and participatory action research allowed for doctoral research? The plan do study act. I'm not sure what the plan do study act is. What that? The plan do. Okay, okay, right. There are these new things that people come up with. They're not real research things. So participatory action research is allowed, but this has got rules, hey? So it's got rules. And one of the rules is that the first rule is that you look. Then the second rule is that you plan. The third rule is that you act. So that looking part, when you look, you invoke and you utilize all the methodologies people use. You still have a literature review. You just have an added dimension where your literature review might be informed by engagements that you've had with the community that you're interested in. You also have an emphasis in which, with participatory research, the actual action of what you do, the intervention, appears much earlier in your thesis, so you do much more evaluation of that work rather than what some theses are about, where they spend the entire thesis understanding the problem so that they can create a solution for it. But in participatory research, you understand the problem, you implement the solution, then you write about what learnings you've got from the implementation of that. So it's actually literally the same. It's just people who do participatory action research badly think that it's a shortcut, but it's actually very, very structured. It's got very good grounding to methodology. The only difference is that its premise is that participation of your target population in the study and everything you learn are central to the process. But in actual fact, the process is still as robust as any other process. Okay, I intend to use SEM to evaluate my model, but being information systems research, a friend advised that I incorporate methods like simulation. So look, folks, I'm totally against this idea that people just pick evaluation tools, data collection tools, anything out of the air because friends said so or they know it to be the case. So this thing about intending to use a particular model to evaluate, you need to kind of say, look, the study that I'm looking at is similar to other studies, and those other studies have used this particular methodology of evaluation, and that's what you're staying with. So the idea that then you add more things because a friend said so, it defies all the scholarly logic processes that one would suggest. So yeah, that's where I start and end with that. Currently, we have a 15th October 22 deadline for submitting our proposals for a PhD. So, folks, that 15th of October deadline, firstly, is a deadline. The university have a different date formally. I'm scared to share that date because then people go around quoting me. But what I can tell you to advise you is that this 15th of October 2022 deadline is a negotiable one, and it is one that you can approach your supervisor to say, hey, dear supervisor, I'm 10 days short of this. Is there anything that can be done? That's the best guidance I can give you. But I'm giving you this guidance knowing that the answer to that request that you're making has every right to be a yes. We can offer you an extension. Carrying stuff over onto the next year means you essentially start all over next year. There's a little interesting thing that is happening which we have not ever had. So all of you who are currently studying and doing proposals, in your study you have a year that is called the proposal module. Then you have another year that is for the dissertation or the thesis development and so forth. Those have been sold to you as two different courses. But from 2023, the university reached a determination that we will no longer have a distinct standalone proposal module. People still do a proposal, but it won't be in that module. There will be one doctoral module that includes your proposal and other things you develop. So in actual fact, if you miss this year's deadline and you still register next year you'll be registered for a doctorate full stop. And if you take your proposal and you work hard on it, you could finish it in March. And in March, you are able to transfer to get a result. And then when you carry on from March onwards, you are no longer in the proposal phase. You have now gone to the next phase. So next year is interesting because of this new policy. It kind of makes the answer I gave you slightly different, but that's the insight. How does one remain motivated to complete the study after data collection challenges? Folks, this motivation thing is multifactorial. There are many things that people do and not all of them work for everybody. But here are some ideas. The first idea is, look, we all study with an expectation that study is going to change our lives. So somewhere in your thinking about why you're doing this, I think you need to focus on that. Secondly, people tend to feel demotivated because the task ahead seems too big to do. So there is something called a very interesting concept they call the 7-minute thesis. And basically this approach works on the idea that you should break down the tasks you've got in front of you into batches of time that look like you would only need to sit down for 7 minutes. So you should look, if someone has done data collection and you're thinking, oh, I have to develop a theory, I have to analyze it, I have to come up with recommendations, I have to do this. So split the remaining tasks into as many smallish tasks to a point where some of the tasks are 5 pages long, 2 pages long. And you literally motivate yourself for the next task and nothing else. And you park it. So there's this idea that people had where they write multiple essays, never ending essays, 20 essays, 30 essays to split up work. So I use this actually for my PhD where I sat down and I said, these are the things I need to write. If I think about them as one piece of work that's 500 pages long, I'll kill myself. So I thought, let me take these 500 pages and turn them into 50 essays that are 10 pages each. And I would just know that, oh, the first essay is about introducing my topic. The next essay is about writing the things that are debated. The next essay is this. And I had all these essays and I would pick the one that I felt was my mood was into. So there were times when I just wanted to write something bland. I would just write the methodology section in in little bits, and so forth, until you capture the mood. And once you consistency is everything. Hey, so if you get into a space where you drop your PhD, do it next week, you start again, you'll never get it. You would rather have a situation where you say, I'm committing 20 minutes every day, no more, just 20 minutes. And I would sit in front of a laptop, sit in front of a book and write for 20 minutes, even if all I do is just doodle. The first 3-4 weeks will seem painful. After that, you will start writing meaningful things. And then after that, you'll also notice that you yourself don't want to sit for 20 minutes. You want to sit for an hour, but you start at 20 minutes. So those are the kind of range of things that you should have under your pillow. My research is kind of a qualitative study. It focuses on investigating English second language teaching and communicative skills, focusing on academic writing. I'm going to use 3 tools of data gathering: observation, structured interview, and document analysis. The study focuses on English language teachers. How can I select students for document analysis? So firstly, Johannes, firstly, I need to know what level of study this is. So if it's a master's, probably you've made it too complicated and it's dangerous. It's unnecessary. It's just, yeah. But if we assume it's a doctorate, so the decision that you will use observation, structured interviews, and document analysis seems to me a little like a decision you just arrived at because that's what you thought was right. But what you need to do is to say, what are the questions I'm interested in? What are the objectives of my study? And which method best fits this? And the basic rule with research is don't add unnecessary methodologies if one primary methodology can fix it for you. So that is so you having document analysis, having structured interviews and observation. The first question is, would you see what you are expecting to see if you did any less of those things? So that's the first thing. So then the document analysis thing, it depends. If it's a qualitative study, you just find the documents and students that meet your characteristics of interest. If it's quantitative, then you number all the documents that you have, assuming they all have similar sort of things they're dealing with, and you randomly select them through a mathematical process. But that's generally how you do it. And sometimes people will just use things in relation to which documents are seen to be most relevant. So you use criterion sampling, that they have criteria they must meet, and you use those. Good evening, Prof. I'm a first-year PhD student and recently submitted to the proposal for committee's review. Do you offer sessions on proposal defense? And this is oral defense. Secondly, how do I get invitations to sessions, as I always miss them? Okay, so Radiboni, I think what you should do right now is you should postgraduate support program at unisa.ac.za. Please email that email address and tell them this very thing that you received, and then you will get invitations. We currently aren't doing defenses yet, and the reason we don't do them is because the new policy and no student needed them. But I was training people for defenses for 7 or 8 years in other universities in the States, everywhere. So I know how to do it. We just need to get enough interest and we'll set something up. But not many spaces are doing that. And folks, don't underestimate YouTube. Hey, I've gone to YouTube and I'm shocked that some of my very prolific professor colleagues have posted things that help people. So I think try that, but yeah. Postgraduate. Oh, sorry. Please ignore the one that I sent. I made a mistake. Yeah, it's been replaced by postgraduate support program. Yes, that's the one that you want, the email. How does one get honors funding? I need assistance. I'm an international student. Folks, we don't give honors funding in basically. So honors is a very tricky space. We give funding at master's level after someone has got a successful and completed program proposal, but at honors level, remember, some of the honors level things are primarily taught. So taught courses, the eligibility is not really in our space. The eligibility is through the National Student Funding structures, NSFAS, and NSFAS has of course got limitations about international students. So that is the sad but truthful answer. Good evening, Prof. You made mention of a previous session where you discussed literature review. I have checked the accelerated online support sessions program and cannot locate it. Folks, please, well, underneath you've been provided by this thing. We've done sessions a number of times. There was one on the 7th and one on the 9th of June. So yeah, I used Prisma, identified 2 records, and after screening, I remained with 13 papers. My examiner advised that 13 seems a small number, but what is what I could when I could follow? But that is what I could when I follow Prisma. What number is considered to be ideal? There is no ideal number. It depends all on folks. So topics have different saturation points. If you do a very seminal point that has never been done, then of course you will get very limited numbers. But there's a trick in this story, and that story is that you are using Prisma because Prisma is a way of systematically looking through previously published work as part of a systematic review. That's what people use Prisma for. You are doing a systematic review because you think many papers have been written and they need to be looked at. So if you can't pull together a significant number of papers, then the premise that there are many papers that need to be collated is already wrong. So, and if that's the case, then you have a problem. You have prematurely wanted to systematically review something that has not been appropriately studied. So in theory, that's what the examiners are frustrated about. But the fact that there's a lower number, there isn't one. But if I were an examiner and you said you initially identified 24 records, that's probably not even enough to trigger a systematic review, in my opinion. People normally start in the hundreds, and then when they cut things down, they're left with 40, 20 papers, 35 papers, but 13 seems, yeah. So there is an issue about your foundational premise that will probably be problematic for researchers. And remember, this idea that of pushing people to do systematic reviews is quite tricky because it's a very complicated process, and I wouldn't suggest or guide it of anyone, probably in their masters of PhD. I would not ask that of them. It's a postdoctoral requirement really, because of the complications that come with it. There are a lot of decisions that you make outside guidelines, and it's just too much. But supervisors are very interested in asking students to do this, but it's not really the done thing. So yeah, but anyway, if you were to do it, my previous advice stands. Please explain time horizon, cross-sectional and longitudinal in the research onion. Right, folks, these are, to me, the research onion is used by people, but it's not exactly, it's not a necessary thing. It's kind of an old, outdated thing that people make reference to. But the idea with it is that to understand the research process, you think about it as an onion that you peel as you go through the different phases. But look, your students are generally much more mentally flexible, so you don't need to use an onion to demonstrate things. But if you're going to, so basically, cross-sectional means that something has been studied and looked at one point in time. So if you today you were to ask people about their impressions around how I teach, and they all answered you today or tomorrow at one point, when whatever one point you meet them, those answers are cross-sectional. They cut across a singular point in time. Longitudinal refers to something that is studied over a course of time. So if I wanted to know how you thought I was doing, and you started, you asked the same people that question over the next 5 weeks, and you studied them over the longitudinal point, then that is longitudinal. Could you tell me that during writing review literature, what types of literature are we to use? For instance, empirical, thematic. Why? Could you tell me the name of the book that describes them? Folks, please go to my lectures, please, on literature reviews. I think many of these questions you're asking have been attended to, and yeah. So I won't repeat that. It just, I think someone has shared the link once again, so there is no shortcut to that. You must go to the sessions. And then how can I get ethical clearance? Look, firstly, there are two types of approval you need when you have a proposal. The first type is you write and your department do what they call scientific review. Basically, they're reviewing your paper, your proposal, to see if it follows and meets the scientific requirements of study. So that's that. Then the second stage. So once you get ethical, once you get scientific review, where they review a proposal and your supervisor says it's been reviewed, this is the feedback, you defend it and you get it. That then paves you the way now with your supervisor to submit that to the college level ethical clearance space that will give you ethical clearance. But it does not happen on its own, and you do not trigger it. The success of the scientific review of your proposal will trigger it. So someone is in IT, was advised to make my research appear IT research rather than social sciences research. Look, there is a commitment when you join something and you are saying in a field. If you went and did your study in a department that is computing science, there's an expectation that you chose computing science because the primary thematic, primary concerns, the primary objectives are to do with computer sciences. If your objectives are less to do now with social sciences, then you shouldn't be there, you should be in another department. But if you have a multi-inter or transdisciplinary study where, yes, you are studying computing science, but you are studying elements of it that have to do with other things, then it becomes a part to do with the percentage of representation. And the view is that, look, if you're in a department that's IT, then a majority of the objectives that you have should speak to IT things, interest areas. Maybe one or two can focus on the social sciences or something else. But if you're finding that your work is focusing primarily on social sciences with one or two smaller objectives on IT, then it is right that they ask that you refocus this or go and register at a more appropriate department. That's kind of where these things are. So folks, I am on my last question, and I can see that we have managed to use perfectly 1.5 hours as intended. The plan now is that we're going to use next week's sessions on the 12th, the 14th, and the 16th to do a full session on writing for publication, a full session on grant publication. But please, please, please look at our sessions that we say you can access. There's exceptional videos on YouTube that we've created. They are literally these sessions that I'm running for you now, and they are predominantly by me, so you can get to continue this relationship. Right, that is the last question that I'm, oh, wait a minute, I found 2 more. Okay, I can't find words to thank you enough, Prof. These support lectures make UNISA different from other universities out there. Thank you so very much, folks. UNISA was designed to be different. I think we had made errors in our application. There should never have been a space where these things did not exist. They are necessary, and you should have anytime, anywhere access to them, should you need. Right. But thank you for acknowledging that. I'm a PhD student. I had 7 factors in a model that I wanted to investigate. However, because I had chosen to use SCM, my statistician advised that I am to use SCM. Maximum number of factors shouldn't exceed 4 for easy analysis. What you advise me? Look, this is a question that I need to have a lot more background to answer this question. Essentially, I mean, so you should have 7 factors if in a model, if the questions that you asked require 7 factors to be understood. So unless I know what the questions are, I don't even know if 7 is the right number. And this statistician advice that you're given that you shouldn't exceed 4, it's a PhD is the highest level of study, so you don't limit it with numbers. So for me, in my sense, I think you need a new statistician. That's what I think you would need, but I can't say that categorically because I need to know the topic. But for someone to say choose 4 things because they're easy to analyze, you know, PhDs are not easy. They are the highest level of study. So, and folks, my general view is that you should never hire a statistician or an analyst to do your work. Certainly not a PhD. You must go out there and study analysis, study things, and it can be done. I've taught hundreds of students, thousands, who were totally illiterate of numbers, how to do this themselves. Statisticians don't understand your topic. They just understand manipulation of numbers. So as a standalone point, I do not support them. If you go to universities outside South Africa, they would not allow you. So where I studied in the UK, where I worked in the USA, you are not allowed. Because if a statistician is to do your statistical analysis, what then stops you from asking a great writer to do your literature review? What then stops you from having a great thinker to do your discussion? So when you think along those lines, you realize that actually part of the problems you have with statistician is you are outsourcing an element of your work that you should not do. So yeah, so I'm sure you didn't expect that answer, but that is the status that we're in. Many supervisors advocate for that, but folks, many supervisors have supervised exclusively in South Africa. They have not had the world global exposure that tells you differently. The world global exposure tells you very differently that if you have a document that's 400 pages long and you're going to be awarded a PhD on it, and you have 40 pages, 30 pages that's commenting on content you did not develop, then how much of that doctorate is yours? So that is, so for me, I would actually, and the person I'm telling this to, if they put their head down and went and read up on SEM, went and looked at some statistical analysis that people have done on YouTube, 2 weeks, they will know this themselves. And then they will be adequately clever to decide whether it's 7 factors or 4 or 5 or 6. Right, so while I'm on that high horse, I think I will now bid everybody farewell. I hope that the sessions have been helpful. I apologize if I'm too transparent, I'm too aggressive in some of my responses, but the idea is to offer myself as one of the perspectives you have access to. And if I'm selling my perspective, I will sell it to the hardest high point that I can, and allow you as researchers to research alternatives elsewhere. Very much like a political thing where politics, one politician will say, I'm the best because of this, and you listen to others till you make a choice. But one thing I just want to say is that the exposure to research, of course, differs from one researcher to the next. And my exposure has been, unparalleled. It's huge. So So you kind of make decisions with those factors in, but it is totally okay to disagree with the decision I've made as long as you offer a logic for it. So on that note, I want to thank you all and say have a great night. The next session that we're going to have is on the 12th, followed by one on the 14th and another on the 16th. So I thank you very much for attending tonight. Take care.